All right, so today we are going to be working with text files. Now, when I say text files, I don't mean like comma-separated files or tab-separated files, but we're working with text files. They're just like arbitrary text files, like no telling what's in them. You can just open it up and then use VBA to go through and make sense of the data. In fact, here's the file that we're going to use. So let's go ahead and get these things downloaded. So download all 4 of these files. These first 3 that end in .data are the files we'll be using, and then the XLSM file is the one that we'll be building our code in. Let me just see if I can figure out how to open up one of those files. I'm just going to open up Notepad, and then I'm going to drag one of these files. Maybe I'll do, yeah, here's a fine. All right. So this is the data that we're going to be working with. Back when I first started teaching this class, instead of having a final exam, we would have a final project. It was a nightmare to grade and made the class so that we kind of had to have it in small numbers. They asked me to scale it up, and a casualty was the final project, even though it was a good experience. So this is actually data from a final project that a student did for this class. Like her father had to deal with this data, like import this data regularly. So kind of look at this page and see if you can tell me something about the data that we're going to be dealing with today. This is literally the way that he got the data to be able to work with for whatever like his responsibility was dealing with this data. So if you look at this, and you can open up any one of those files and kind of peruse it a little bit more, but yeah, looking at this one, what are you going to make sense about? What can you figure out about this data by looking at it? Go ahead. Okay. So you've identified a lot there. Really good. So this is, let's look at these individual ones. So yeah, so we're looking here. This is 1 week. This is from the 4th of November, 2008 to the 10th of November, 2008. And it is precipitation data. So this is the 24-hour precipitation tabulation. And I'm not sure if I don't know enough about Brazil to know if these are all states. Is this a state? That's a state. Is this a state? Is that a state? Oh, that's maybe more than one. Anyway, so yeah. So it looks like these are probably places where they are measuring. They've got weather equipment to measure how much rain, and this is the tabulation that comes in. And this is the way the data comes in. Now, this is a kind of an unusual way to get data. If you look at this, is this page designed for a computer to read? It's not. It's designed for who? For whom? It's designed for a human to read, yeah. And it seems like a kind of a strange format to be able to get this data in. But this is really kind of a common problem that we have with legacy systems. So, can you imagine that there are still like systems running today that were like made literally like running on hardware that was put into place like in the 1980s? Yeah, like for big companies, like mission critical systems, there's a lot of mission critical systems that are running on mainframe hardware that gets upgraded in a really different way than we think about upgrading PC or laptop computers, where we'll just say replace this one with a new one. They're like replacing it kind of part by part and getting more speed and more memory and moving things out of it. So they're still running like old code. And one of the interesting things about these systems is that when they were built, like in the early 1980s, if your company had a computer, how many did it have? It had one. It would be absolutely absurd to think that we're going to have 2 computers. And it's set up for multi-user concurrent access. And so everyone who needs access to it can get at the data. But the idea of saying we want to get data off of this computer and put it onto another computer is something we hadn't thought about doing yet. And so as we move into the early 90s, and now we've got like lots of different computers at our company, and we're trying to figure out just how we're going to manage all of our data, we kind of come into this problem where we say we've got data on on this legacy system that was never designed to play nicely with others. In fact, if you were one of the people that had access to the data, you had a terminal, you could look at it, but most of the folks who are using the data off that computer in the early 1980s, they don't even get their data by having a terminal access. How do they get their data? Yeah, it's like every day, a certain set of things get printed off, and a guy with a cart goes around the company, pushing this cart around, dropping off your print off for this week for you to work with whatever you need. And yeah, it was a terrible time. Yeah, I was there for that. You don't want to be there. Tons and tons of paper we would go through. And let's suppose you had a report that was coming to you every week, and you thought, you know what, I barely ever use that report. Are you ever going to say, stop making that report? No, because what's going to be like if you say, you know what, I want to get that report again? It's going to be a nightmare to get it coming again. And right now, it just shows up. And so you might look at it, you might not look at it. It's going to get recycled. And that's kind of the way it was. But now, once you have a personal computer in your office that may or may not be connected to a network, you'd like to be able to get that information digitally. And these mainframe legacy systems were never meant to play nicely with others. And so how are we going to solve the problem of getting the data off of that mainframe onto another system for someone to be able to work with it? And the answer is, some really smart person said, kind of first back up. I mean, the way printers worked in the day was like, you know what? We're just going to plug in a printer into this port, and we will send information to that port. And the printer, just like you send an A to that, and the printer prints A. You send a B, and the printer prints B. You send character number 13, which is a carriage return, and it's going to send the print head back. Printers were really simple compared to printers today, where you're printing graphics and everything. All they could do is print characters. And so some really smart person said, you know what? We could just plug in like a printer that instead of printing to paper, it prints it to a disk. Like, take the information that's getting sent to that port, like exactly the same way that we're meant to print things, but instead of printing it to paper, it prints it to a floppy disk, to a disk that we could then take that to another computer and load it up to just make a text file out of it. And that's exactly what we're looking at here, is that this is a document that was designed to be printed. It was probably written in a system. The language was probably COBOL, a language that if you can find someone who knows COBOL today, they're probably really old or dead. I don't know. There's not a whole lot of places teaching COBOL anymore. There's a few places in the country that still teach COBOL because there's people that still have to maintain these systems. So it was like, great, now we have a way to get that data out. And so, this is one example of having to work with a text file that has data in it that you need to get to, that's not just, this is some standard format that I can import the data in. And so our goal today is going to be able to say, through VBA, how can we open up these files, be able to read the data out of these files, and bring this data into Excel. It is a stepping stone on our way to being able to work with arbitrary HTML data. We started working with the web query wizard that would pull data into Excel. When we pull data into Excel, we lose anything that's not visual. Like when we use that web query wizard, if it's not visual, if it's part of kind of buried in the HTML, the underlying HTML, like it may be information that's in a link. If we just use the web query wizard, we lose that. And other thing the web query wizard can't do is it can't log into a password protected website. That's like the next major thing that we're doing. It'll be the last project that we have you do. But what that means is that you're going to be getting raw HTML files from that server and then having to parse them. And so today is like a stepping stone on the way to that. So the stuff that we're learning today is going to carry forward to working with password protected websites by controlling Chrome to be able to get that HTML data. But we're doing today, before we're introducing any web stuff, this is just in the context of text files. So our goal is to be able to parse through this file, pull that data out, put it into Excel in a way that we could then work with it to graph it or do whatever. All right, any questions about what we're about to do? All right, well, let's dive in and get started. So we've got the workbook open called Parse Text Files. I'm going to open up the code. I think I've got some code started to get us going here. Yeah, so we've got here process data. And this is just using stuff that we've seen before. It's going to be using the dir statement to be able to build a collection that has all the files in it that we need to be able to process. And what it's doing is it's saying, hey, we're looking in the same workbook that or the same path that our workbook is in for anything that is star.data. And then that'll give us a collection. So if I run this, it should just print off the names of the files that we have, this name of our text files, and there they are. So here's the text files that we're going to work with. So in terms of like working through the whole set of files, that part's already there if we can get process one file written to handle a single file. And here we have process one file that's sending just one of these files down here. So again, this workbook, the path separator, and then whatever the name of the file is that we're after. So we should be able to do our Acme subrunner and be able to work with these one file at a time. Okay, so let's see what it takes to be able to open up a text file. So here's what we do. The statement to open a text file is open. We then give it the path of the file that we want to open. And that's what we're sending in down here. In fact, let me just go ahead and print that off. Debug.print file path and stop. I'm going to run this to that point. So here's what it just printed off, right? This is the full path to that file that I want to be able to work with. And so now I'm just going to open that file so I can read it. I'm not like opening it into Excel. I'm just telling VBA, get access to that file so we can start getting data out of it. Like open that file so we can start reading data out of it. It's going to do the kind of thing that Excel does when it tries to read from the disk. We're going to do that now kind of step by step. So we then give it the full path that we're after. And so in this case, it's just called file path. We then have to say, there's different modes we can open a file for. We can open a file to bring data into VBA from that. That's what we're doing. And so that's going to be input. We can open a file for output. We're going to put data from VBA out into that file. Or we can open it for like both, like open one file and say we're going to read data from it and write data to it kind of back and forth. And the only one we're going to do in this class is for input. So let's do that. So for input. And then this part is weird because it goes back to the 1970s. I'm going to say as number one. Now, if we were writing the methods to be able to work with a text file now, we'd return an object that connects up to that file. But this was written before there was any notion of making object orientation a part of the basic language. And so when we say as number one here, we're saying, listen, we might have 4 or 5 text files open at the same time. We got to keep them straight. And so we're going to number them. And so this is the number one text file that we're opening. And so we will use that file number to be able to say, hey, we're doing file operations. We might be having 3 files open to read from, 1 to write to, and we'll be and that number is going to let us keep it straight. Okay, then when I'm done with whatever I'm doing with that file, I'm going to close it. So I will just say close number one. Now, there's several different ways that I can read the data in from this text file. I can tell it, hey, just how many characters do I want to read in? And using that approach, I might say, just read the whole thing into memory. And these files are not that big. We could read them all into memory just fine. But one of the things that's really powerful about working with files this way is that if you say, listen, if this file is bigger than I can put into memory, it takes a pretty big file now to not be able to fit into memory. But you can imagine getting a text file that's got a crazy amount of data in it. You need to work with that data, and it's too big just to load into memory. And so the approach that we're going to take is we're going to read this file one line at a time. So rather than say, take this whole file, put it in memory, we're going to say, no, just open a handler to that file so that we can access the data from the disk. But now just go and get one line off of that file. And the statement for doing that is called line input. So I'm going to need a variable to put that line into. And so let me come up here and declare a variable. I'm going to call it one line. And I'll just make that as a string. And now I'm ready to read one line off of that file into that variable. And I say it this way, line input. Number one, I'm telling it which file I'm reading off of. And then I tell it which variable I'm putting it into, one line. And I'm just going to move my stop down to there. And I'll run. One line has an underscore in it. So let's put an underscore in and run to there. Okay, just because I got no error, that means successfully opened that file. What does it mean? It means the operating system now knows that this program, Excel, is working with that file. If someone tries to copy this file or move this file to somewhere else, the operating system is going to say, no, that file's open. Close it first, and then you can move it. So I've got what's referred to as a read lock on that file. And I've read that variable in, so I should be able to, if I opened up that file, here's that file. This is what that first line looks like. And so I should be able to just kind of peek it over here in my immediate window, one line. And there it is. So it has read that first line off of that file. Okay, I want to make sure that if you're trying to follow along with me now, that this part is working for you. Is there anyone going, oof, it's not happening? All right. So now in fact, if we were just to execute that line again, so we're going to read two lines. I'll go back now and execute that. I've already executed that one. Now I'm executing the second one. And I was to look at what's in one line now, I've got that second line. So when I say line input, it just says, hey, go get the next line off of this file and put it into whatever variable I've specified. In this case, I'm putting it into the same variable. So what happens to that contents that says WSI Corporation? What happens to this information when I run this second line input statement? Right? It read this line the first time, put it in that location in memory, and then we're reading the next line and putting it where? Same location. What happened to this line? Poof, it's gone. Right? It's just, it's no longer there. Can I tell this file to go back and get it? No, this is a read forward operation. And so if I haven't done what I need to with that file, it's gone. Of course, I can close the file, open it up again. I could start my reading again from the beginning. So it turns out there's nothing in that first line that we need, but there is something in the second line that we need. And so like this information is what we're going to need. Now, because this is organized for humans to read, here's the data. We don't need this, like this is the percentage of normal. I'm actually after the raw data. So I don't need this block. I'm interested in this block down here. And so when I'm going after that 14, I'm going to have to know that it's in that particular state. And this particular weather station, or the weather station at this location that it's getting it, I need to know that it's 14 units, it's millimeters here. So we've got 14 millimeters. And when did that happen? What day is that? Yeah, November 7th of what year? And the answer is, like the November and the year happens here. In fact, it's on the second line. Like this whole report is dealing with November of 2008. And I then have the actual day down here. So I'm gonna have to do something kind of tricky to be able to keep track of that so that by the time I get down to here, I'll be able to say, there's the 14. It belongs to this particular weather station in this particular state on this particular day in this month and year. And if I haven't paid attention to getting that information, by the time I get here, I can't go back and get it. So I'm gonna have to pick it up on the way. Now, because everything is November 08, and that's what I have, like that's what I have in one line right now, let's just think about how am I going to go about getting the month and year here. So I've got this sitting in memory in one variable. Any thoughts on how I might go about tracking down, and because I've got to remember November 08 for everything else that happens in this file. Like this is stuff that we've gone over in class before. We're kind of applying it now here to this string. How could we get the November 08 off of there? Go ahead. Yeah, okay, so you're thinking of the string manipulation function. So the ones we had, let's just remember, let's see if we can remember what some of the ones might be helpful. So you're thinking left, and there's like two others that kind of always go with that, left, right, and mid. So left will take something off the left, right something off the right, and then mid something from the middle. Okay, what else from those string manipulation functions might be useful here? There was another one called that let us look inside a string to find another string. Remember what that one was called? Search is what it's called in Excel, and we could use the Excel function, but there's one built into VBA called instr, like in string. It returns the position of one string inside of another. Okay, so using maybe just some subset of those four functions, how might we track down to get the November of 08 here? Now, the first thing to me that's tempting is to say, well, maybe like this data always starts in the same location, like the same column. Maybe I could just say I want the mid of one line starting at some column, starting at some character and going for a certain number of characters. But what makes me a little nervous about that is right here, June. They've spelled the month out. If that was J-U-N, I'd probably bet, you know what, that's always going to start in the same place. But this, they're going to probably have May or January. They'll have different dates in there. So I can't just say that that's going to start at the 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. It's not going to just start the 19th character each time. So how might I do it? What could I do? Go ahead. I'm pretty sure we don't have any months that are hyphenated. Like this is not like, April, May or something. So I'm not expecting to see a hyphen. So yeah, I can look for that character right there. And then once I've got that, I've got the rest of the month and year that I'm after. There was a suggestion over here. Was it something similar? Excellent. Okay, so let's just do that. I'm going to go ahead and give myself a variable to keep track of my month and year. So dim, I'll just call it moyr, M-O-Y-R, as a string. And let me also dim position as an integer. POS is short for position. And now that I've got my second line read here, let me just do that. Let me just say the position that I'm looking for is equal to in string, INSTR. Now starting at the first character, looking at one line, and looking for a hyphen. Now, if it doesn't find the hyphen, position is going to be 0. So let me just do this. If position equals 0, then let me just say stop. Something really unexpected. I didn't expect that to happen. If position equals 0, then stop. So this is going to be like debugging code that, like if this, I'm expecting that to be greater than 0. If it's not greater than 0, I don't have the line that I think that I have at this point. Otherwise, I'm ready to set my moyr, M-O-Y-R, equal to, help me out, what am I going to do? Mid, starting where? At my position, taking how many characters? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Looks like 7 should do it. Okay, I've already read these two lines, so I'm just going to drag my current statement back up to position, and I'll run it from there. And let's see what moyr is. Moyr is not at all what I thought it would be. Let's see what my position is. Oh, mid needs to have somewhere to start. Mid needs to have something to look at. Mid is looking at one line. All right, let me pick up the positions already 18, so I'll just go to this line. One line. Yeah. Do I want that leading hyphen on there? I think I do, because ultimately, when I read that stuff from November 7th, I'm just going to put that together like 7/Nov/08 and put that into a cell in my workbook. So yeah, I'll just leave the hyphen there because ultimately I'm going to be prepending something to this anyway. So far, so good. I've got the month and year now that's relevant. So now my next trick is, how am I going to figure out I think I essentially want to ignore everything until I get to this line. So this whole block up here, not relevant. That's summary. I'm after the raw data. So how could I do that? How could I like just kind of continue going through that file until I get to this line? Like, what's unique about this line that I think is going to be unique in every file that I get that's going to distinguish this line from any other line? And one thing I might do is I might come here and I could read a couple more lines to get past that equal sign, and then I could read to the next line that's all equals. And then I would know I'm only like 3 lines away or 4 lines away from what I'm after. But is there something about this line that I can just look at that line itself and go, oh yeah, that's the line I want? If so, I could put myself into a loop just saying, hey, just go get another line until I see the line that I'm after. Any thoughts? Like this is kind of what this process is like. How am I going to figure out to get Excel to hook into this file structure, the structure of this file, so that I can, give it a set of instructions that's hopefully not too complicated to get to the data that I want? Go ahead. Okay. So one possibility would be to say, hey, we're just looking for this line. The problem with that is that it's got the dates in it. So 10th November. Yeah, that would be tough. And to make matters worse, let me just open up. You open up one of these other ones. I think it's maybe this one. Yeah. We look at this file, like it never, like if a week doesn't fit fully in a month, I get just the part of it that's in that month. So yeah, it would be pretty complex for me to try to figure out what's that supposed to be in the middle. I thought I saw another suggestion over here. Yeah. Maybe total norm, or maybe even just norm. If I'm just looking for norm, let's see. Let me close this one that's got the 3 on it. If I'm just looking for norm, yeah, like the only place I'm seeing that show up here is like on these lines that have total norm. So the line that ends with total norm would do it, or even just ends with norm. I'm not comfortable just looking for one that contains the string norm, because who knows, but what I'm going to get data that introduces a new weather station that says norm in its name somewhere. So I think if I can find something that ends with norm, I'll feel pretty good about that. So let's do this. We've got the month and the year. Okay, so now we're going to find I'm going to say find where the data begins. And so here, I'm just going to give myself a little loop, do and loop. Put a do events in here. And I'm going to do until the right of one line, the rightmost 4 characters of one line is equal to norm. And what am I going to do in this loop? I'm just going to read the next line of the file. I'm going to read a line. Does it end with, first of all, does it end with norm? No. In fact, it might make more sense to put this down. I know the line that I currently have doesn't go there, so I'm going to put this down at the end. So read the next line. Does that line end in norm? If it does, I'm done. If it's not, go to the top, read the next line. Does it end Am I done? No. Read the next line. Am I done? No. Read the next line. Am I done? No. Read the next line. Am I done? Yes. And then I'll move out with the one line that has that norm data on it. So it looks like I'm still in break mode here. Variable not defined. I should have called this one line without the underscore. That's how I want to type. One line. Even so, I think I'm going to save my file right now. Anytime I go into a loop, I'm always comfortable saving it before I get there, even with the do events. And I'm going to run that and see what happens. Well, it let me out. That's a good sign. Let's see what one line has in it. Yeah, looks like it. Looks like I've got the days now that I'm going to be dealing with. And those days are going to be the same like throughout this file, 4 through 10. Like this file is only about those 7 days from the 4th to the 10th of November. So once I read those days for the first time, if I keep track of them, then I got, hey, great, now I know the days that we're dealing with. So how am I going to get those days out of there? Any thoughts? Go ahead.
It's like the right and the left function take off station.
Okay, so I could use right and left to take these off. Well, the thing is, when I use right and left, it doesn't actually take them off the string. It just returns them back. But what you're saying is, I want to get to this stuff here in the middle. And so I think mid will do that for us. Now, I've got some spaces to deal with, but let's deal with the spaces here in a minute. Let's start off by saying, yeah, let's pull out the ones that have here. So I'm just going to kind of count over. Where does this start? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23, I don't know, 22. I think I'm probably safe if I start at the 22nd character and then take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I bet if I start at the 22nd character and take 40, I'll be in good shape. So let's create a variable called days. I'm going to make this as a variant. I don't know that I've ever made a variant variable in class before. So I'm going to use variant here because what I'm about to do is I'm going to say, you know what? I want to start off by making this a string, but then I'm going to want to split that and make it into an array. And I think I'm glad to use the same variable for kind of both of those steps here. So it'll behave like a string one time, behave like an array the next time. That'll be great. So right here at the end of my loop is where I've got that. And so let me go ahead and set days equal to the mid of one line, starting at the 22nd character and taking 40 characters. And then I could probably do this all in one step, but let me do it in a second step so we can see it. I would like to get rid of leading and trailing spaces and any spaces I have on the inside of that string. I'd like to collapse those down to a single space. Oh, how would I do that if I was working in Excel? Trim, that's exactly what trim does. Now, trim in VBA only takes off leading and trailing spaces. It doesn't touch anything in the middle. But trim in Excel does exactly what I want to do here. So I'm just going to call it worksheet functions. Worksheet, F-U-N-C-T-I-O, worksheet function dot, oh, it's worksheet function dot trim. And then I will pass it days. So let me go ahead and I'm going to run those two lines and take a look at what I have for days. Let me run the first one just with F8. Yeah, so there it is, leading spaces, trailing spaces, extra spaces in the middle. I'm going to run my next one. And then look at days again. And now it's collapsed it down to no leading, no trailing, and just one space in the middle. So now I'm ready to make that into an array. How can I do it? Split, just what it's designed for. Days equals split. Look at days. And I think if I don't tell it, normally I would tell it what to split on. I think if I don't tell it anything, it assumes space. Now I should be able to look at days sub 0 and I get the first day. Day sub 1, I get the next day. Even so, I think I prefer seeing that space in there, even though that's the default. If I don't specify it, it means space. I think I like to see it in there. So outstanding. So now I have an array called days that's going to have that set of days for me. I'm liking it. Questions? Show me how you're doing so far. 5 would be like, I'm totally understanding everything that you're doing, even though I might not have been able to do it myself, but you're understanding. Yeah. Okay, good. Mostly 5s. Right, what else do we have to tackle in here? And kind of get back up to the first time that we're going to see this. So now I've just processed that line and I've extracted out the days. So I've got the month and the year. I've got the days. Next thing I'm going to need is this state. It looks like even when it's not a state, it still begins the same way. So how am I going to find it? I could just keep reading until I find the asterisk, or 3 asterisks, probably space 3 asterisks as the very first part of the string. But as I'm looking at this, it looks like it's always just 3 lines down, isn't it? If I was to read 1, 2, 3 lines, I'd get that. Let's just do it that way. Let's just get that many. So I think just a for loop would be good for that. So let me just dim another variable up here. You dim x as an integer. Let me just have myself read 3 more lines. So here I'm going to find the state for x equals 1 to 3. And then I'm just going to read that one line. Don't really feel compelled to put a do events in here because this is a really vanilla for next loop. It's going to go just fine. So I'm going to run that to my stop. Look at one line. Yeah, looks great. So I think I'm going to need to keep track of a state. Go up there and make another variable, dim state, as a string. Now I've got the state. I'm just going to go ahead and put the state in. This one I'm going to do just in one statement. State equals, And I think what I can do is just replace asterisk with a space or with nothing and then trim it. So replace, look at one line, look for something, replace it with something. What am I looking for? Looking for an asterisk, replacing it with a 0-length string or a space, either one, because I'm fixing to trim it. Trim the result of that. And that should give me then just the state. One line strikes again. Now I've got that state without the asterisks and without. Not sure I like it in all capitals. I think I'd prefer it in proper case. I'll leave it in all capitals. There's a proper function in Excel that I could just call to put it into proper case. There's not one in VBA, but there is one in Excel just called proper that will do that. What's that? There's one in VBA. What's it called? I'd be thrilled to know what it is. All these years. I've been teaching this for 20 years. Oh, VB dot proper case? Oh, use the string convert statement. Yeah, we can do that. All right, I'm gonna leave it all capital for now. Now it looks like I've got, back up to the one I'm after. Again, read 2 more lines, and then I've got the line that I'm after. So I think for reading 2 lines, I'm just gonna do line input twice. So this is advanced to the data. And that should give me, I'll run those two, that should give me in one line. Yeah, I've got my first thing here. Now, sounds like we got some folks that are familiar with Brazil. Any idea what the difference in the meaning is between the $ and the asterisk? That has some meaning here, but I have no idea what it is. What's different about these two than the rest of them? Any idea? No. So apparently there's some information there that we could encode if only we knew what it meant, but we don't. So I think we're just going to skip it. So now this really looks like it's fixed width. The only thing I'm worried about is that we might have a different width, like maybe the longest one determines where this goes. So I'm just going to kind of scroll down and see if my insertion point keeps staying right at the beginning of these. It looks like it does. Like my little cursor there is always lining up right in the beginning of that data. So it looks like it's fixed width data. So this, what is this? This is the city. And then this is, oh, it's a station. It's called a station. We've got a station within, we've got a call number here. So let me create variables for those. Let's dim station as a string, as a sting. Shoot. And let's dim call. I can't use call. Call is a reserved word. You use that for calling a function or a subprocedure. So I'm going to call it call no, also as a string. I could probably do this as a long integer, larger than 32,000, so int won't work. But I don't need to do any numeric operations on it. I'm just going to track it as a string. So that's fine. I'll have to run my code again. That won't be too bad. Advance to the data. So this is the city. Okay, so now I'm going to, or station. So station is equal to the mid of one line. Starting where? I think the second character, and we're going to go right up to that data. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Got to have a space between it. So 11 would probably do it, but I'm going to take 12. And I think I'm going to want to trim that as well. So I'll wrap that inside a trim. My call number is equal to, looks like these are always 5 characters. Am I right about that? Yeah, these are 5 characters, and it's even like ending underneath that, the header. I think I'm just going to take 5 characters on this one. So this is going to be the mid of one line, starting somewhere and taking 5. Where does it start? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I guess it starts with the 14th character taking 5. All right, I'm going to run to this point. Let's just see where we are. Whatever I did wasn't running. Acme sub runner. Boy, I never got that spelled right. S-T-R-I-N-G. One line rides again. I'm changing it. Okay. Let's just see what we've got. So we should have a station now. We should have a call. Okay. That gets us up to, let's get back to our first one. That gets us up to here. Boy, we're almost done getting the data for our first line of observations. Any thoughts on how we should deal with this? Yep. Exactly the same way that we did days. In fact, I'm going to go copy and paste. So somewhere up here, I've got days. Dim days as a variant. Let me dim data as a variant. And then where's the block I'm dealing with days? Right there. I'm gonna do the same thing with data. So data says, look at one line, get that same block from it, trim it, and then split it. So change this to data as well. Type mismatch. Oh, not days, but data. So now I think I've got data sub 0 should be, wow, should be zeros until data sub 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Data sub 0 should be a 0. Data sub 4 should be a 9. Data sub 6 should be an 8. Yeah. I think that's it. Like I've got all the data I need now to be able to write this data out. Ooh. So here's sheet 1. I'm going to put it right on sheet 1. That's just a great place to put it. I lost my code. Oh, here it is. And let me view my Project Explorer. Got sheet 1, and its code name is also sheet 1. So I'm just going to refer to it by sheet 1. I'm going to need to figure out, though, also, I'm just going to write the data. I'll worry about doing the rows later if we have time, getting the headers later, but let's get the data in right now. So I need to know which row that I'm on. So let me go ahead and give myself a row variable. Give row as a long integer. And let me start row off at 2. Now I think I'm ready to write that data out. And we now have, we're going to want to write like all the information for our first number. So we want to put like the month, or I should say the date, the state, the call, the station, the call number, and then the actual number. So let's just write the first one out, and we'll have to have some kind of a loop for doing this. So let's get those first ones written out. So cells, sheet 1. Cells, row number row, column number 1, value. And this is going to just be our month and year with our day. So something concatenated with moyr, M-O-Y-R. And our day is days sub 0. We're going to have to make that into a loop to get all 7 of them. But let's just get the first one going now. And then column 2 is going to be our state. Column 3 is the station. Am I right so far? Column 4 is going to be our call number. And then column 5 is going to be data sub 0. Okay. Give that a shot and see if it brings in our first line. I've declared row, but I haven't run the line that sets row. So let me just do that in the immediate window. Row equals 2. So I just executed that line in the immediate window to give row its value. It looks pretty good. Yeah, and notice that Excel actually read that as a date. So even though it says for Nov 08, it's showing it as a date. Nice. Excellent. So now, see, what did we use X for? Oh, X is just used locally here. So I think we can reuse X and put this in a loop. So we want that to happen, that whole thing to happen multiple times. So for X equals 0 to, probably the upper boundary of either days or data, they'll be the same size. Upper boundary of data. Next. So now instead of days sub 0, it's days sub X. And that should give me, we need to increment our row as well. So we'll write that out and then we'll increment row. So right now row is 2. So we're going to write over the top of this one with the 0 data and then put in the next 6. Yeah, got the data that we're after. Excellent. Okay, well, we've got the first one. Right now we've gotten to here. What's our next step going to be? Thoughts? We've got to do this part that we just did for the next line and the next line and the next line, but it's not always the same because we've got a different number of lines depending on which state we're in. Our next one is a lot smaller. So we're just going to have to we're going to figure out kind of where to build a loop so it can do that multiple times. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and advance to our next line here. So let's go ahead and get our next line input. That'll get us ready for the next one. And then it seems like, yeah, that's what these two are doing. These two are getting us to that line. So here's where we start pulling the information for, the station call and the rest of them. So I think I can put a do loop here and a loop here. Have all that in. Better put a do events in there as well. And how are we going to get out until, loop until what? That to me looks like it's a blank line. I'm trying to highlight something to the right. There's nothing there. So I think we can probably do it until the length of one line is equal to 0. I'm not entirely sure that that's a 0 length line. So I'm going to save. I've got my do events in there, so I'm feeling pretty good. I think I may duplicate some data here, but let me go ahead and take it back up there and just run it and see if it goes. Oh, got to the stop. That's a good sign. Yeah. Excellent. Got all the way down to, someone say that in Portuguese. Juiz de Fora. Feel so international now. And was that the end? Yeah, that was the end one. Excellent. Well, I think that's it. I mean, there's nothing, here now we just have to find all those blocks. So how am I going to get to the next one? Oh, I think I'm already doing it. Right? From there, I want to go until I find that line that ends in norm. So let me find the line that ends in norm. Find where the data begins. I'll call where the data block begins. I want another do loop here. Do, and then loop all the way at the end. I'll loop here. And then tab that whole block in. Now, in this case, when I'm on my very last one, let's think of what happens going to be on the very last one. So I've just processed this one. Oh, I still do get the blank line after it. Let's think about what's going to happen. After I've processed this whole set, I'm going to loop until one line is 0. So I've got this line in it here. And my loop is going to take me back up to this loop here. And I'm going to come into this loop right here. And I'm going to do now until I find norm. Am I going to find norm? Again, looking down from here? No, I'm done with the last one. I've only got maybe 2 more lines to read. And so this one is going to cause me a problem. Because this one's trying to go until norm. So I'm going to give myself a different way to get out of here. Let me at least figure out when I've gotten to the end. So I'm going to read that one line, and then I'm going to say if something, then I'll do something else. If what? Well, it turns out that there's a statement to let me know when I've reached the end of the file. So like a native statement in VBA, it's called EOF. EOF, and I got to tell it which file I'm interested in, EOF number 1. And that will be true or false. And so, and it's similar to when we did something like this when we were reading from the database. Was it EOF for that one too? I don't remember. Anyway, when I read the last line of data, EOF is still false. But when I read past the last line, that's when EOF gets set to true. And so I've read the line, and that's when, if the data, or if I'm out of data, that's when this will be true. Well, in this case, what do I want to do? Here, I'm done processing the file. What should I do? Okay, so there are a couple approaches here. One, and the problem that I'm trying to show you here is that I'd like to just get out of this loop. So how do I get out of a do loop? Exit what? Yeah, exit do. But what's the trouble? I don't want to exit this do loop. Which one do I want to exit? I want to exit this one. Now I'm in trouble. Because exit do will only get me out of one level. So I have to have some other variable that says, oh, if this variable has been set, like done equals true, if done equals true, then exit the next one as well. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you an approach in VBA that is really dangerous if you embrace it and use it where it doesn't belong to be used. This is the only place that I know of that it's a valid reason to use the go-to statement all by itself. And that's if you want to jump out of a deeply nested loop. And so I'm going to do this, go to. And then I'm going to have a line label. We'll have to make the label still. Go to end of all loops. That's just a label which we'll create. It has to be spelled just the same. And then right down here at the end of my last loop, where next thing I'm doing is just closing this file, I'm going to put that on a line with a colon after it, and that makes the label. So this lets me jump to a different arbitrary point of the code within the same procedure, sub-procedure or function procedure. You can do all kinds of crazy things with go to and labels. And This is like the only thing I've ever found them to be a valid use for. But if I look at this, all I'm otherwise doing is I'm closing the file. That's it. I'm done. So I think what I would prefer to do, I've shown that to you, but as much, I mean, because I did want to at least expose you to that, even though it's a dangerous thing and you don't want to learn to live with it. Instead of jumping to there, I'm just going to close the file. And another way to jump out of this is exit what? Exit sub. Yeah, that'll take me all the way out of this sub procedure. There's nothing else I need to do once I've got to this point, as long as I've closed that file. I like this much better, just because goto is, it can make code ugly. If you think, oh, you know what? I just need to jump over to here. I'll put a label on a goto. Don't do that. Okay. Hey, that's pretty good. So I think now that'll process the whole file and stop. So I'm just going to run it and see if it does. Wait, I got to stop in here probably somewhere. Let me get rid of it. Here's my stop. I'll stop that and I'll run this again. Let me clear my data out. And I'll just run. My sub runner, boom, brought the data in, close the file, not in break mode anymore. Well, when I go to pull in the next file, I don't want to start at line 2. I want to start at the bottom of this data. So I think that's the last thing I have to do here. I've set up to process a single file, but now saying it to start at row 2 each time I call this, sending it a file to process, that's no good. So we better set row equal to, sheet 1 dot cells, row number, rows dot count, column number 1. That'll take me to the very last row of my spreadsheet, column 1 of the last row of my spreadsheet. From there, I want to say end Excel up. And then from there, I want to ask for the row. And then I want to add one to it, because when I'm getting that next one, end Excel up, I think is going to take me on to 904. So control up arrow, yeah. So I don't want to write over 904. I want to come to the next one down. So my end Excel up refers to that cell that has the data in it. Row gives me the row of that data, and then +1 gives me the next blank row after that. So now I think I'm ready, because I think process data already runs through the files. And it will do these one at a time. So I just need to call process one file instead of printing that file. Let me run it and make sure it's printing full paths. I think it is. Yeah, that's printing out the full path. So instead of printing it, let me just process it. And I'll run it. For each file, type mismatch. So for each file in files, let's see what the type of files is. So there's a function called type name. I can give it a variable and it'll tell me F-I-L-E. My guess is this is going to be variant. Oh, it's empty. Oh, because I haven't actually run this. It's realized it's going to be a bad type right here. So let me comment this line out. Debug.print. And then let's see what the type name is. Yeah, so that's a string, really. File's a string, and what am I expecting in process one file? I'm expecting a string. I don't think that should be type mismatch. Let's see if it lets me uncomment this and move on from here. I don't think it will. Or it will. By ref type mismatch. Now, when I call a sub procedure and pass it a variable, this thing has to line up process one file, but it looks like it is lining up to me. That says it's a string. Anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come here instead of, I'm going to tell this to accept the parameter a little bit differently, by val. By saying by val here, that says, even if you could just give me a reference to the variable, make a copy of the data. I think that will take care of that problem. Try to run it again. So let's see. 4th for all, oh, here's December. Yeah, so we got out of November into December. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got some November and some December here. Looks like it worked. I'm not quite sure why it wouldn't let me pass it directly. That's the solution. Whew. That's the process of parsing text files. It really is a creative process. It's not like there's some rule I can tell you, follow these rules and it will parse correctly. You got to think through and kind of scratch your head and say, how can I figure out how to tell it an algorithm that will make sense of this data in a way that it pulls out what I'm after? Any questions? Yeah. Yep, this one right here. Yep. When's the database project due? Next Wednesday? Or next Monday? Anyway, next week. As a reminder, this is a substantial project. Like, I don't know, you might want to think of the hardest one you've done so far and multiply it by 2 or something. You don't want to wait to start this one until just before it's due. All right. Thanks for coming, folks. Class dismissed.